Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and today I get to have Mitchell back. So Mitchell, welcome back, dude.
It's great to be here. Yeah, it's been how long? Like 3, 4 years, maybe. I know
Yeah,
you even mentioned that I looked different from last time.
yeah, no, for
Like,
sure. It's been like 3 to 4 years, and you had long hair the first time I interviewed you. You look more INTJ like back then. Now you're like looking away from being an INTJ, which might be a good thing. Um, you know,
yeah, I
uh,
don't want to be controlled by our types.
yeah, exactly. So can you tell us your full type, please?
Yes. So my general type is INTJ jumper, and the full code would be MF. So I guess that's the audio modality. NIFI, sleep, consume, blast,
And play last.
and playlist. Yes.
I don't know why people don't mention their last animal. It's there, like
It's important. Yeah. I guess it's because it's implied by the math of the other ones, so it can be efficient not to mention it, but at the same time, yeah, you don't want to treat it like this void or something you literally don't have to do.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I don't do this, right? Because that's gonna create a lot of problems potentially.
Well, people do use their last animal, especially as they get
Yes,
older.
exactly.
It's not like it's missing, but yeah. I think the missing thing was in the early days. I think you got typed during the early days when it was missing. Missing this. That's what they used to say.
And now they're putting it in more often.
Well, it's not missing anymore because people clearly are using their last animal. So, um,
Yeah.
like David Chan said, like Tony Robbins and Gary V are using their sleep last really well, and they have feminine inner world, and they're using it. So there's no excuse people not to use their last animal when someone that has it last and double feminine are using it, right? So let's go over your journey then with your ST play last, and your play last is MF. So what has your experience been like with that since we last spoke, which has been like 3 or 4 years ago? Uh,
Well, yeah, so it kind of relates to some of the stuff that you were just talking about. I probably wasn't really using it as much at all, really. I probably spent more time just in my sleep inner world doing and consume, reading a lot of things about what was interesting to me, whether that was like typology or psychology or philosophy or something like that, and reflecting on it and collecting huge amounts of information and processing it without necessarily trying to make it more realistic or connected with the rest of my life or whatever like that. But there's been a lot of changes since then in my life. So one thing I mentioned is that I have a girlfriend who is from very far away, actually, from another part of the world, Ukraine, and it hasn't been easy for us to necessarily meet up and be together. And that's something that's taken a lot of time, but it's also been really rewarding. And I think she actually probably even has a pretty opposite type to me in some ways, more like play with like masculine T. And yeah, so very opposite to me in that regard. And not just even meeting, but even being together and spending time together, having to adapt to one another. um, and learn to use these functions that are opposite in a way that is getting along to and more accessible to one another. And we've also done a lot of traveling in that process because that's kind of been the way that we've had to. So I've had a chance to travel to a lot of different countries and get a lot more diverse experience. I traveled to Ukraine, Egypt, Spain, Greece, Germany, Dubai, Austria, which is where I am right now, Italy. Whereas before, I had only been to the United States, and it wasn't really much of a diverse experience, a getter or a traveler. But it's really expanded my perspective of the world to interact with it more in a lot of different ways. And also, even just when I'm in some place for a longer period of time and spending more time going out, getting to know the streets, walking around the city more, finding the things I need, living more independently. And that also causes me to use my TE and SE a lot more in a way that's useful to me to, yeah, organize my living space and have the life I want for myself and the people around me. That's kind of a lot of blah, but I hope it was a little bit, gave a little bit of insight into kind of where I'm at. Would you have any other specifics, questions about that?
Well, I want to point out the good stuff about what you said. First of all, it was
Mhm.
ST. It was actually ST. It was in bullshit. So, you actually name the specific places you've been to, which is very ST clear. You kind of mentioned like the actual journey where, where your girlfriend is from and all that stuff. So it was very ST, which is good. It's not like fake ST, it's real ST.
Mhm.
So that was good. It sounds like you're actually using the actual play, which is like, expending energy for the tribe. Your tribe is your girlfriend,
Yes,
and then you guys are traveling.
yes,
You guys are expending energy together, which is good, right? Because and it's also interesting also from like an IJ perspective, because you're an INTJ, you live in US the whole life, and now you're like outside your box.
yes.
Which is awesome. And then I can't even imagine how much that like revitalize your inner world, just having like more fresh materials to process, just really almost like expands your box. Now your box is so much bigger now, because once you've experienced something, it's now inside the box, right? So it's like a much
Yes.
box.
Yeah, and that's one thing that is, I think, very useful for IJs in general because it's just sometimes because still I'm very much an organizer, and so I can see how that's like kind of a savior in addiction or whatever, and I want to organize a lot of what I do, and I still do that, but having to apply that organization to a more dynamic and active life helps me to focus it on things that are more useful and actually going somewhere more productive as compared to paying attention to lots of details where I'm not necessarily sure if they're actually going to really matter.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you've heard before from
Well,
other IGs.
I think in general, IJs, the more materials you have to work with, the better decision you can make about your life and also other people's lives. So, if you were to blast with anti-blast, then anti-blast is better because you have more materials to work with. And also with your NF sleep, like if you're trying to create a trajectory that is meaningful to you, you can also make a better decision because you have more materials to work with. Those IJs that narrowed down so quickly, in their 20s, without any experience, real life experience, are fools because you don't know anything about the world, and then you can narrow down already. And was that really the best path for you? I mean, obviously, ignorance is a bliss, which is a thing.
For
Also,
only so long
yeah,
until you get tidal wave by
right.
it.
Yeah, eventually something is gonna smack you in the face because you didn't plan for it. There are two things that I do want to ask you about the ST play to see how well you are doing in those aspects. The first one is gathering information from the tribe, because and also doing actual physical work or labor with the tribe, because that's also what ST play is. You do any of that personally?
Well, yeah, I would say I do a lot more of all of those things. Well, first of all, for gathering information, definitely just as part of getting a chance to live in so many different places, I have to walk around in places where I don't necessarily speak the language of the people there, and I have to get used to asking them questions in the moment to get what I need. And sorry, I was gathering information and then also labor, right? So also I live with not just myself but with other people, and they have different preferences than I might in my more kind of lazy in my inner sleep world state. So I have to be more ready to mm, do tasks that will be helpful, to be something that makes them happy, even when well, yeah, even when I might necessarily be in the best, most energetic state for that, or uh, well, basically, I also have to develop new routines as a part of that, and I guess some of that also even gets into the organizing, kind of using the organizing to help me with the ST play a little bit, like changing my own habits and the things that I'm used to. But yeah, I definitely find myself doing all kinds of regular, everyday sorts of activities and chores that, and having more energy for it than I would have 3 or 4 years ago.
Right, right. So it sounds like from that aspect, you are on your way to really using those ST play.
Mhm.
There's one thing though that I've noticed since I spoke to you last time and I spoke to you right now that is probably going to be the biggest sticking point for you when it comes to ST play. Um,
Mhm.
I see you as a very serious person, and part of play is exchanging energy, like how energy DOMs do it. If you watch David Chan, they're always messing around in their videos, right? Absolutely no, not a single seriousness bone. They're just fucking around pretty much and
I
joking
am very
around.
serious. That's
And
true.
and um and I think that's gonna be the hardest part of the play itself. It's just like when someone pings you, you would ping back to them with something even more ridiculous, and it becomes like a back and forth of ridiculousness, where you're just complete being idiots back and forth. Is that something that you find challenging to get to?
You know what? I would say that actually it is. That also is challenging to me. And a lot of the other people in my life too are also probably infodoms as well, are also serious people. So
Right.
I don't necessarily get that directly from them, but it is something I've encountered. And it's not always something that I have an easy time with. Like sometimes I have the reputation in some of the typology communities that I'm in as like this overly serious uh, person who only wants to discuss these detailed, dispassionate arguments and things like that. And sometimes people want to joke around and mess around more. And honestly, like, yeah, I mean, I'm also an observer, so I don't have, I'm pretty flexible with that. I don't necessarily mind other people having different preferences and whatnot, but joining into that kind of back and forth, um, more lightness, I guess, of the play is definitely something I could stand to work on.
Yeah, if I ever see you having like a banter with someone, I know you've made it, like it's just like a lighthearted banter.
Yeah, I get there, with some people, but yeah, my seriousness definitely kicks in sometimes
Yeah.
with that kind of thing, and I can like take offense to something that maybe didn't really need that, or whatever. But I know that it could be worse at least, but it could also be better.
Right. Um, I'm also info dom, so it's easy for me to talk to you because I do prefer the back and forth exchange of information and also, taking turns of one person will blast, one person will consume back and forth, making sure the accuracy of information is present. I do see the difference though with the people with lead play and sleep last versus the play last, where obviously they also have similarities as well. But the biggest difference I've seen is those with play savior and sleep last, even though they prefer to info dom, if they notice that they're speaking to someone that's an energy dom and they see that, oh, okay, this person is losing energy because of this conversation, because energy doms have trouble keeping up the info dom kind of conversation, right? They just want to mess it
That's
up.
an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically those with sleep last and play savior, they'll inject some energy into the conversation, like just to mess around or joke around just for like a few minutes or a few split seconds, just to get them the energy dump to pay attention again and then bring them back to the info, because otherwise they've already zoned out probably if you were just talking purely on info without any energy infused in the conversation, right? um
Yeah, and that is definitely something that throws me off sometimes because like I just am so focused on making some serious point where there's like lots of information involved in it that I processed or read about or want to talk about, and then someone wants to mess it up with something that's not serious that can actually be quite, that's, well, in the past at least for sure, it's definitely been something that could be quite annoying to me. But it's interesting the way that you put it, that um they're like losing energy from the conversation. So I like looking at it that way because you could see it as something that needs to be balanced more. Like you don't want to give so much info to someone who isn't oriented to that, but
Right.
they're actually losing energy from the conversation and you're not really interacting effectively with them. That doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
So that's kind of a helpful thing I'm getting from that, a useful way to add to the way of thinking about those kind of interactions, even though I still have my preferences. I want to balance that for the sake of the interaction if I want to have it.
Right, 100%. It's also ironic because I feel like infodoms get energized by actual solid back and forth conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally feel that way, and I lose energy doing the energy dom stuff. It's crazy. It's weird. Because I'm thinking I don't want to mess around. I don't want to goof around. I do in small spurts. But in between, I do want to have the more serious conversation. So I do find it funny that certain types get drained by method of communication versus other kinds. And obviously, it
Yeah,
also
that's
helps.
definitely something I'm interested in looking into more.
Right. And I think it also helps if you have the same function as someone. For example, we both share TE and FI. So that part of the conversation will be relatively easy because we both have it.
I can't remember. Are you're ENFP?
I'm an ENFP. I'm play, blast, consume, sleep. I'm like your opposite.
So a jumper. Okay, got it.
I'm a jumper. Yeah. Yeah. So
All right, that's what I thought.
yeah. So I mean, so because we do share the TE and FI, so we speak in the same language, so to say, for those ones. And then where we would kind of talk past each other is your SE and your NI versus my NE and my SI, right? Because those are the different points. I do find people with SE tend to take things at face value, while people with NE they're not saying anything at face value at all. It's all categorical, which is might be okay for your type because you actually have
A lot of N. Yeah.
you have a lot of N. You have tons of N, right? So, but
Yeah.
if you don't, if you're only single activated N, it might be harder. You know, so
Yeah, but do you also see that in terms of like your SI as well, that when it comes to like structure, you are more like literal, it has to be a certain specific way?
my SI, well, because I have it fourth, so it's triggering for sure, but it's triggering in a weird way. It's attached to FI, right? So um one way it has to be a certain way is like floors. I'm obsessed with floors. So for example, if people come over, when I was living in my own apartment before, if people come to my apartment, they have to leave their shoes in the front. I don't want them to walk in their shoes inside the house, and otherwise I freak out. It's really weird. I don't know why. It's just like a weird SI thing.
There's just some SI things that I guess like any dumb people often have. I remember them saying that like some of them can be like grammar Nazis or something. But I guess that might not apply to everyone. It might be more individual than that.
Well, my girlfriend's an INTJ like you. She's can sleep, consume, play, blast, typed by Dave and Shan, double feminine, feminine sensory, but she's a grammar Nazi and a spelling Nazi. So
That's
it,
interesting.
I
So
think
it's anecdotal a little
it's,
bit.
I think it's a person thing. Like certain people are
Yeah,
obsessed with spelling. Could be an IJ thing too. I don't know.
that's
Uh,
true. Well, for sure, because it's organizing related and it's
sure.
definitely an observer oriented thing because
Right.
it's the thing, not the people.
So I do want to touch on to your social type. What do you think is your social type based on your findings for yourself?
That is a good question. So yeah, although I wasn't officially typed as I think I might have mentioned,
Sure.
I would guess probably three. Um, that's I guess the dichotomies in that one is that it's more specializing than results oriented, and it's more flexing than friends. Um, so yeah, I am very much interested in excelling in a certain few areas, the things that interest me most, whether that's the few people in my personal life who matter most to me, my favorite subjects like typology, psychology, and data science and mathematics and things like that. And I tend to kind of tune out a lot of other things. I'm not necessarily interested in being like a leader or responsible, um, or getting like results that don't necessarily mean much to me. Although I can really see the value of those kinds of people and how they're able to juggle so many different people and so many walks of life and do things more quickly and chaotically. Um, And in fact, that's also, yeah, probably my girlfriend's probably opposite to me in that regard as well. She's probably a two. Uh, so that's an area where we also, I think, give a lot of value to each other, but can also be not the easiest in terms of communication sometimes. So is that kind of how you would see the opposites working? Like that
Between
it on the one hand they could give a lot of value to each other, but on the other hand it's like not as not as easy to get on the same wavelength right away.
I think David Chan said like is that ones and fours are best friends and enemies, while threes and twos are best friends and enemies essentially. Because you would essentially be curious about each other's strengths, but also be triggered by what the other person is self-projecting to the other person as well, which is essentially the demons of each other. So I could see that happening. Ultimately, when it comes to dating, it's better if you share at least one aspect of that social type together, where you can kind of meet each other. Like Dave and Shan have savior responsibility, being Shan's the number one and Dave's the number two, right? So they both have savior responsibility, and that's where they kind of meet each other. I'm a number two. My girlfriend's a number four, so we both meet each other at the savior friends, right? So I can see her valuing her friendship a lot, and she can see me valuing my friendship a lot. So that's where the overlap happens. And then there's also there's still enough differences to add spark to the relationship, where she sees me like taking control of situations, and I'm the one that's more in a leadership position, while she's happy to just kind of go with the flow with whatever the tribe wants. So in that aspect, I am curious about yours in a way that my biggest thing that I'm curious about being a number three is how do you flex? Because you're introverted, right? So where like how do you flexing?
Yeah, exactly. It's that's why I also put it in like quotes because exactly I'm not like the super out there person. Like I definitely don't relate to being a number one in that sense. But at the same time, like I want to achieve a lot and I have a lot of goals in the things that interest me most. And when I achieve those goals, I like to write long pieces about it, to flex about it maybe with an article or on my LinkedIn profile or something like that, so people know that I have a certain skill set or I've achieved a certain thing that's important for me to get somewhere. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely not as much of a flexing in the sense of like in your face. In fact, that might be kind of annoying to me, but if it's too much anyway. But I mean, I see the value of at least wanting to strive and achieve in a lot of things.
I see. So your flex is subtle. It's like the fact that you went to Medium and then you attach your name into like an article that you wrote or something. That's like a subtle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
it's
It's
more
not like
something like that.
it's not like someone that is an extrovert would flex pretty much has like a megaphone, while yours is like a subtle like
Yeah, and then I'm
attached
also,
to
yeah,
your
not
name.
just introvert. Yeah, it's the sleep consume blast. It's like the most introverted stacking or something
Right.
like that.
Exactly. So I'm just curious how the flex would look, and it makes sense. Like you're still attaching your name to an achievement. It's just like more in a written format, so it's not like a megaphone style, of doing it. So that's really interesting. And also, David Shan said that number threes are the most introverted type compared to the other three social types. So you're introvert on top of introvert, which is actually, if I look back at everyone I've interviewed, you are definitely the most introverted person, probably, if not.
I wouldn't be surprised. And honestly, like for certain periods of my life, I've been like super classically introverted, like almost like permanent. Like I barely like only really talk to people on the internet, don't really do much else. But in interacting with other people who are quite different than me, in my life, I do have the chance to work on my play extroverted interaction skills. So I might not necessarily come across as introverted as I was then, but I definitely still have those characteristics just as part of my personality, the desire to kind of just go deep into something, kind of shut out the rest of the world, and then come back not or well when I've spent a lot of time processing it and
Yeah,
perfecting it.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've also interviewed other play last people that are number four, so savior friends, and they're so extroverted in their play last. It's so weird. So um I do see that each animal, I would say, has about maybe four different aspects of it, or quadrants you could say. And one of them is the back and forth playing with the tribe. And I think for you that's the hardest part, because being a number three, in my opinion. While with the other ones who
Yeah, right, because it enhances that OI even more probably.
right,
Yeah.
but even others who are OIs, like my girlfriend's a sleep consume play blast INTJ, but she's so extroverted. She's so friendly, right? She's introverted if she doesn't know who you are, but the moment you're inside a box, she's extroverted to the max, like crackhead style. Like the play blast kicks in, and it's because she's a number four. She absolutely loves people that's already inside the box, and she wants to socialize with them. So, so it's interesting how you could be type twins with someone, also play last, and be completely different people just because of your social type. I do want to
There's
ask
just
one,
so much variation. Yeah, like that. Sorry, go
exactly.
ahead.
No worries. I do want to ask you one thing though about your type, which is also very fascinating. Um, so your sleep is tied to your flex, right? And your blast is activated because it's attached to your number three, because blast is attached to flex to specialization, right? You know. But the weird thing is your last animal, or not last animal, sorry, your second animal consume
So,
is
yeah.
tied to your last social type, which is responsibility. So you are gonna have cognitive dissonance as a result of having your animal consume attached to um responsibility coin. And
Yeah.
I would just want to ask you how that feels like to have that one area where there is a cognitive dissonance in you.
Yeah, I actually can see how that would work for me in that I am naturally an IJ and not necessarily very like natural in exploring all the options right away and all the energy that goes into doing that. But because the consume is the savior, I do still feel a responsibility to do it, especially when it comes to things that are very important to me. So one example that might apply is something like typology. Is I've actually studied like 10 tons of different models in that particular field because I had a problem earlier when I was just getting into this kind of thing where I would think that like just my box has all the answers. And of course, after a few years of that, I ran into enough problems that I was pretty much forced to realize that wasn't the case at all. And it sort of was such a life-changing kind of experience that I kind of went the other way, especially combined with my savior consume, which is very perfectionistic and wants to get all the information. I'm like, okay, so I really want to be diligent and responsible in making sure that I'm not just specializing too much in just this narrow thing. I have to make sure that this is going to end up producing a result that will be communicable and interesting to a wide variety of people in a wider variety of communities than just the small range of people I interact with. So it got me to studying a much wider variety of options. So it's like naturally I wasn't that way, but because of certain experiences with tidal waves and my savior consume, I am still responsible when it comes to exploring the options, especially if I can connect it to something that's interesting to me. Now, I'm sure I still have a lot of work to do on that in terms of things that are more important to others than me because it's still my last, I guess, social. Well, yeah, I guess that's in last place for social, or for specialization social type. But yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And I just want to add, like, number twos typically they're more broad in terms of, jack of all trades is the description, and
Mm-hmm.
having more variety of skill set as opposed to one narrowed, really honed in, um, high level, artisan like skill set with something. So with the consume, you are forcing to get yourself outside of the specialization box, which could and that's I think where the cognitive dissonance can come in, where you're like, oh, I don't want to go outside, but I feel responsible to. So
Yeah.
there's like that inner frustration, but ultimately it is for your benefit, because you're not gonna have the tidal waves that typical IJs would have. The fact that you've explored the world, and you've actually consumed legitimate information, not just uh consume from that narrow inbox. The fact that you mentioned you've studied, was it 10 systems of personality typology?
I'm throwing out that number.
Sure.
That's not an ST number, but
Okay.
it's a fair amount. Yeah, like on my Discord profile or something, I have like a bunch listed, and I got a ton of official typings, things like that, and talked to a bunch of different people about that as well, and got a sense of like how they work with their system. So
Did,
yeah, it's something like that.
slightly off topic here, but kind of on topic. Which of those systems that you've studied you found the most had the highest utility?
That's a good question. So one that I'm probably the most known for online is humanitarian socionics. That's the socionics school that's run. You've heard of socionics, probably, right? Just to make sure. Yeah, it's like a Jungian derived system with all eight functions and things like that. But yeah, the socionics school run by Victor Galenko. That's one that I have a lot of experience with. I taken classes in for years, and it's a very different kind of approach to socionics than you might see with a lot of more typical Model A schools that you might get when you just search socionics on the web. And it has a lot of commonalities to objective personality in the sense that it has a huge variety of types, because they recognize that there's like some base types and there's lots of different subtypes to that and different ways that people can change. But yeah, I'm interested in doing a more in-depth comparison of that kind of thing later. But yeah, another one is of course objective personality itself. That's why we're talking about it. It's very useful in pinpointing the areas that were just kind of natural and are easy for us, or maybe a bit addicted to, and areas where we leave these voids that cause us problems. I find it very keenly points out that kind of thing in a way that's useful for a lot of people. Um, what's another one that I found particularly useful? Another one that's pretty cool is voltology. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
What is it again?
Voltology, sometimes also called cognitive type. The leader is Juan Sandoval, but he basically has this very like evidence-based system of like visual signals that you can use to determine the type of person. And he's published a lot of information about experiments that they've done where they have a very high rate of agreement, kind of like objective personality has been working on as well with the typing in different rooms. So that's something a little bit similar there. And they have a lot of interesting, very kind of high level intellectual conclusions about how it relates to information processing in the brain and whatnot. Yeah, and then there's other systems I found more or less useful as well that I'm still exploring, like Enneagram and Psychosophy. Actually, you've heard of that. It's it's a more popular system in the East than like Russia and Ukraine. They use it
Oh,
sometimes alongside socionics. They have like four different things: physics, logic, emotion, and will that different people can have in different orders. It's pretty simple, but it has some pretty interesting conclusions about how people get along when they live together and interact and deal with all kinds of everyday life tasks. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. There's definitely a lot more unique little systems, and it's something I could spend plenty of time talking about, but
right.
I'm sure I will in the future.
I see. So basically, you're taking bits and pieces from each system and integrating the ones that you feel is most useful for you.
Yeah, I'm interested in studying more in depth, kind of like what insights from them are useful, and then also how they connect or how they don't connect. Like, are they actually dealing with things that are completely different? To what extent are they kind of overlapping and dealing with the same thing and maybe could be synthesized? There's not a lot. I find there's really not a lot of very cross system discussion in typology. Like a lot of people want to discuss their particular system and the systems they work with, and often they are very complex, so that's understandable. But it's just something I kind of foresee in the future that might be important, because more and more of these different communities will be interacting in various ways, and they're going to want to compare their ideas and kind of see what works best. and things like that. And there could even be some competition there and things like that. So, these are interesting topics that I like to think about, in addition to actually using what I can get from the best of these systems in more practical ways.
You know what I found interesting with all these different typology systems and the people that are behind each system is none of them actually took the time to deep consume each other's system. There's some
Exactly.
skimming going on, but there's no deep diving going on. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I think
So
you are on point when you say that at some point that will be important too.
in building the super system, we
Yeah,
have to actually consume everything that's been done. And believe me, that's not easy for me either. I'm an IJ,
right.
but I do have consumed Savior, so it's still telling me like we have to do this. And I'm kind of experiencing the problems of not doing it, and how it breaks down communication and leads to needless hostilities and things like that. So I'm like, you know what? This just has to be done
I think the fact
at
that
some
you
point.
are an IJ and you're giving this advice to consume, I think that's powerful. I feel like people should take you seriously because it's coming from an IJ. It's like what Dave and Shan said. If an EJ is telling you to look at your identity more, that's a good advice. While if they told you to serve the tribe more, that's a bad advice,
Or
right?
Jordan Peterson telling you to clean your room.
That's a good advice because he's an EP.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then he's telling you to be more responsible also because he's a number three, right? So it's that those are all like amazing advice coming from
Yeah.
preaching your demons essentially. So I think the fact that consumes like your demon, but you're an IJ, so you have a tendency to
Partial demon. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Partial demon, partial savior.
yeah. Um, okay, that's cool. I am on board with you, and I remember I was talking to Benjamin about this before, and he did say he consumes all the systems, just not to come across as ignorant. So I think he is on point when he mentioned that a long time ago. I haven't
Yeah, I
consumed
talked to
all the
Benjamin a
systems.
little teeny bit recently.
Sorry.
I talked to Benjamin myself a little teeny bit recently. He just came out with this podcast he's doing also about this like bi-cognition project he has, where he's met with some other people that are interested in OP, and they're interested in introducing it in like an academic setting and doing some kind of data sciences and quantitative like ST sorts of analysis to really prove certain things even more. And that's also something I'm interested in getting involved with. So I'll have a chance to use a little bit of my ST as a part of that, I hope.
Oh, you're involved in this project,
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't done anything that's I don't want to act like I'm like doing
right?
things, but like I just heard of other projects and I've done work that's like similar, intersects with it a little bit before. So I basically talked to them and I'm like, well, this is really cool. And I'd love to help out. So I hope I get a chance to do that.
I want to ask you about your social type, about specialization that I'm curious about. So you hyper focus on just one thing that you want to be an expert in, one for professional life and one for your personal life. So, typology is your hobby on the side, right? That you kind of delve into.
Yeah, I'm interested in fact in my professional life, but yeah, I mean, it's not always easy.
Sure. So when those external factors come in to try to deviate you from that focus on your craft, essentially, um, how do you respond to those external things trying to deviate you from the focus on that one area? I mean, you might even believe that person is valid in what they're saying, but it's also a waste of time in your case because that's gonna take away time from you, and someone else should do it, even though you think it's valid, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a
so
tricky issue for sure. Dealing with distractions just in general. I would evaluate it basically, I guess, as a three. Is this something, and also like with my NI, which likes to kind of look far into the future, is this something that is going to be important? Is it something that I am going to need to eventually be responsible for, even if it's not really what I want to do for my project right now? Then if that's the case, I can kind of get my NI on board to kind of organize for it or include it in my routines in a certain way. I like to be somewhat flexible in my plans. I guess my NI is also feminine. Maybe that kind
right,
of helps
right, that
a
makes sense.
little bit. But yeah, in some cases, though, if there's distractions that I don't foresee being useful, then I guess I might sometimes still go very full sleep mode and just say, you know what, this is all I have time for. I can't do everything. I need to minimize my energy expenditures. I only have time to interact with this thing this much. I might start by interacting with it more than I want to, and then kind of see like I don't really have the energy for this. This is taking too much time, and then kind of dial it back once I notice that.
Oh, I see. So you'll consume enough just to see if it's worth exploring, and then that's kind of where you'll make your decision where to further it or not. So that's where it kind
Mhm.
of helps a little bit that you actually took the time to just get the gist of it before you
Yeah, and some of it is
reject it.
also probably my feminine TE a little bit, like just like naturally I am inclined to be somewhat friendly to people and like
Yeah.
give them the benefit of the doubt at first, but then I start to see like this kind of isn't going to work well, or it's just not really giving much in the way of dividends, or I don't foresee it doing that, then I'm like trying to find the best way to minimize dealing with it.
You do because you're lead sleep and double activated at that. Um, sleep also people with high sleep or how sleep is utilized in general is setting rules for yourself, right? So, what rule have you set for yourself when it comes to deviations? Because once in a while you will come across a deviation that's worth maybe not exploring at that moment, but potentially delegating to the future, or at least postponing for the future, right? So, what kind of rules do you set for yourself to determine whether it's an outright rejection or if this is something that not right now, but it sounds like it could be something important later. So let's
That's a good question. Yeah, and I deal with that a lot because I do have that SE consume there. So basically I in general really try to keep my life organized. I use like some managerial softwares for that, like Trello, where I can organize a lot of different tasks on various lists and then try to move them through the system in various levels. Like, this is something I want to get to uh, later, but doesn't really have a deadline. This is something that has a deadline, so I'll put it in this list and it's more important. And I try to kind of move it through the system to get to the done pile. And if something really is not worth my time, and I don't think it will ever be worth looking into in the future, then it probably won't make it onto the software at all. Whereas if it is something that I think might be, but I don't really have time for it now, it just goes on one of the lower priority lists. And it's just something like when I'm maybe each week or each month putting together a new list for the things that need to get done for that time period, I might gloss over some of those lists and see maybe if I could find time to explore some of those things or deal with some of the things, but not too many of them as compared to the more important stuff.
Gotcha. So the Trello is the back pocket essentially. That's the back pocket, and it sounds
Exactly.
like you're using a lot of getting things done system by that
Mm-hmm.
ISTP guy, to organize it. It's like would be nice, but not important. That's kind of like where you shove that extra in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I'm also curious as a number three with demon friends, how do you manage your relationships? Because it's not missing, but it's a demon.
Right.
So I've heard different stories from different number threes on how to manage it. Like I know one number three who has no friends. The only person that they have is their partner. Well, I heard another number three tell me that she has two friends. One, they meet each other twice a year. It's very like narrowed down, and they take each other out for lunch or their birthdays once a year for each other. And then another friend that she has is she talks on Zoom once a month for exactly 1 hour, you know, so 12 times per year. So there's like specific rules to her friendship. So I've seen some number threes with, maybe one or two friends, or ones with no friends at all. Where are you in the spectrum when it comes to friends and family?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've really never been a person who's had a lot of friends, so I could relate to threes in that sense. Like when I was growing up, I really had like just a few best friends that I would want to interact with maybe on the weekend, after school or work or whatever. But now, honestly, like just in regular life, because there's been so many changes in my life in the past few years and things like that, there really aren't people I really almost ever meet with in real life, although I do get interaction through my family and close people and whatnot. So I guess they're just my friends in that context. Now I do meet with a lot of people online on the internet and interacting with these different systems and things like that. So that can also get kind of overwhelming because there's all these different I mean, social media is just it's just like a deluge, pretty much. Like I've had to kind of really limit that to just a certain amount that I want to interact with, that I think will be the most useful. And sometimes that's been kind of a hard choice. It's like, well, there's this people here I want to consume with, her that could be a useful relationship or whatever. But I just can't do everything. So the way of doing relationships online in real life is just so different because you're exposed to so much more immediately, but then it's also not as much like uh, play as real life interaction, not as much like immediate interaction. In terms of the real life interactions too, I mean, I meet with my coworkers every once in a while at uh, at my job, but I mean, we're not. I don't know if I'd say we're friends. Like we don't have a lot in common, but I can kind of go along with every once in a while because it's useful to just keep a good working sort of relationship. But yeah, I would say do just yeah. The general essence of my answer, I guess, is that yeah, I don't have very many friends in like a real life sense. But yeah, online, I've got to limit that deluge of social media to a few pockets that I can control and manage.
I feel like I feel like social media is, you know, it's like a phone book from back in the olden days. It's just like a contact list essentially. If you need to get some information from someone, I wouldn't say it's like real friends per se.
Yeah,
Unless
so
you're
yeah, in my case, I would agree. Like in the vast majority of cases, it's just more like acquaintances. There might be a few people though that I've interacted for a longer period of time with, for like years, and like know each other really well. We've had a lot of deep conversations that I have made some friends
right.
that way. And sometimes I've even met with them on like Zoom or some kind of software like that, and we would like talk together or do some kind of activity, like play a game or watch a movie or something.
I see.
But you're right. For the vast majority of them, it's I wouldn't say they're friends.
Right. Um. Yeah, because it's not like when you were a kid, you're seeing them after school and stuff. So
Right,
so
exactly. And those relationships deteriorate because it's like, well, we just go in different directions with our lives.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Um. Shoot, I had a really good question I was gonna ask you, but then I forgot. I hate that when that happens. Oh yeah, no, I remember now. So there's this weird rumor going around in the community, and I want to hear from you because you're number three. So some people are saying that number threes, because of the demon responsibility, are bad with money. What is your experience with finances personally? Would you because it's been like I don't know if this is any truth to this rumor that's been floating around the community, or it's just like some anecdote that some person is true out
It's
and
probably somewhat situational. I could definitely see it happening. I guess one way I could see it happening to a three in general is because they're focused on so few things that are important to them. Money might not be one of those. So they could decide, I need to put all my resources into this thing, and the money uh, can't be holding me back from that. And it doesn't necessarily matter that much. Like maybe I'll just live off like just a few little things that I need, and not have to worry about other people and all the other things that might help me with. I mean, speaking for my own experience, I haven't really had problems with that, but I wouldn't say that I've necessarily been particularly focused on it either. Like I would definitely put a higher priority on having the kind of job that I wanted, that I saw going in a way to advance my own interests and other things in my life rather than just making the choice that's going to give me the most resources that might allow me to deal with the most problems. I guess one of the nice things about money and why I could see it relating to responsibility too is that it lets you do so many things.
right.
It has like so many, like just a generalized utility. Um, but in order to get that, naturally, you have to provide that utility yourself comparatively in the market.
Right.
So, I can see why the specialist would have a hard time with that, is because they might not necessarily always, unless people kind of know them very well for their specialization, they can be paid well for that. They might not necessarily uh, be looking to have that kind of results and impact on other people in life that, like, I don't know, ones and twos probably do more often. But the specialization, on the other hand, I mean, if they develop it in certain ways that people do value, on the one hand, it could actually potentially make them a lot of money if they kind of had their niche of the market that they master. So that's probably something that they could shoot for.
Yeah, no, 100%. I did speak with some number threes recently where, the general rule of thumb for them is their work speaks for itself. So you don't have to do much marketing or selling because,
Yeah, and I don't like that either. Yeah, that's
yeah,
another thing. I mean, I understand the need to do it, but definitely not my specialty.
yeah. And then David Chan totally agreed with that sentiment as well because it makes sense. Like, why do you need to have a gimmick if your thing is so good already? Like, obviously, sales and marketing is still important, but you wouldn't need to do as much sales and marketing if your product or service already speaks for itself, essentially. Um, so I want to go over another cross check for number threes. This is one of the weaker ones, but I just want to get some information, maybe hammer it in to make it better. But apparently number threes likes gifts. Do you like gifts?
I don't know what you mean by that. Like just getting gifts or like gifts as a particular method
Apparently the love
in
language of threes is gifts. Like they like to receive and give gifts.
I wouldn't say that's particularly true of me. Uh, Probably I value things more like physical touch and quality time than just gifts or something like that. But on the other hand, I can definitely see the value in paying attention to the kind of gifts someone might like, because sometimes people really do appreciate that. And so, in order to be in their good graces, you'd want to remember that and put it in your system.
I see.
For
Gotcha.
otherwise, you could easily forget in your little box.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than giving someone a gift and that the gift was there's no thought given to the gift, it's just sloppy, in my opinion. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I just wanted to point it out because it's like a thing now. It's like, they're trying to attach love language to a social type, and in my honest
I wonder
opinion,
why. Why would they pick three for gifts?
it's just something that they're experimenting with, is they're attaching it.
Mhm.
I do think for number twos, like for me, I'm a number two. Acts of service is definitely on point because number twos, they're spinning their wheels, they're doing so many things, and they have
Exactly.
like one or two specialists that comes and helps them out. Oh, they feel great. It's just like absolute best feeling to have acts of service. But then wouldn't you also argue that like the number threes would also like acts of service because they don't want to do all those other stuff also. They just want to focus on one thing. So someone else did it for them, they would also feel good. So it's like it's one of those things, right? It's like I'm starting to see that like there's like overlaps with that love language almost. Like I'm also seeing like ones and fours. Ones is supposed to like words, right? While fours is like quality time. And that's quality time does make sense for force who loves friends and family, right? But a lot of force also loves words, but it's different from the one where like the ones wants a word that would boost their ego, essentially like recognition, for example, while the force would prefer appreciation, like or validation, that knowing that someone loves and cares for them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that does make sense. And I
so
can
so
definitely see how that applies to some people in my life connecting that now.
yeah, so I'm starting to see just from my own experiences interviewing people with different social types, it's like it seems like the ones and fours, they it seems like the words might be something that they share, and like the threes and twos share access service almost, where in different context obviously, um so I don't know, it's just something I'm observing. Obviously nothing set in stone yet. I'm still trying to interview enough people just to get enough data to actually see if there's any pattern in this. Right now it's that's where it's pointing at, because what David Chan said, and they also mentioned it's experimental at this point, so it's okay, right? It's just like it's in beta, so it's okay that it's not honed in yet. It's just a current theory, and I think the current theory right now it's not quite sticking. I guess, which is a good thing with TE, is like throwing things at the wall, see if anything would stick. Um so right now it's not sticking, but it's good to explore just to see if there's any truth to it.
Definitely. To connect the different systems, that's less information that we have to deal with. And that's actually one of the other reasons that I appreciate it as an IJ, is that I want it all to be organized and make sense
Right.
and just kind of work together. So even though there's all this different information, a lot of it does connect in certain ways, and we can pare it down a
Right.
little bit.
um so last thing that I want to touch base before we wrap up this interview is do you have anything that you want to ask me in terms of anything before we wrap this up?
Hmm. Well, um, yeah, I guess I would be interested in hearing a little more about how you, as someone who has play first, but you're still an information type, how you experience the seriousness of that. Because I was finding I can see how it makes sense for sleep first, but does it make it sense for play first?
I goof around a lot, but ultimately I want the serious conversation. Like the play is integrated with the blast and the consume. It's part of the deal. It's not like, because like you can use play to gather information also, right? Um, and you can use it to gather really good information, especially if you know what you're using. So it's almost like a covert way to gather information, where like if you were to use play on someone and you want to get a specific information about, let's say, certain relationships and how they're interacting, but you don't want to directly ask them, then you can use play.
That definitely makes sense. I never looked at it that way. It's like a bit like a scout or like a journalist or something like that.
Yeah, like you prod
Where they can,
someone and then you see how they react, and the reaction gives you the answer that you're looking for. Like,
whereas if
for
you're just in your
example,
sleep world, you might not get that information, although you might process a lot.
yeah,
So
like
yeah.
an easy one would be like, oh, for example, if you're talking to a decider, right? And then you casually just mention, it's like, oh yeah, I was just talking to this person, and we had this little like friendly, like fun banter about something, you know, and then the decider would give you a reaction, right? Either like, oh, they either don't like this person or they like this person, and then and then you can see in their face too if they wins or their face change based on your interaction with that person. So it's like a good way to sub uh get information from someone without being overtly invasive, I guess you could say.
Interrogating.
Yeah, it's not like interrogation. Like it's not like blast, like tell me now, it's like controlling the tribe to provide you information. It's more like, it's play. It's
And I guess in their case, yeah, I can see how the blast would be serious because they're like a megaphone and then they would take it very seriously when they also have a consume. Like, I took the time to learn this. You should really listen to what I'm saying.
yeah. And also plays for public speaking, because like I feel like
No doubt.
if you're
No.
just using blast, even if your information is spot on, it's really good, you
Losing the
have just
connection
bored
a little
the
bit at the
audience.
moment.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
also the thing with play is you take people with you, like you make the information more relatable because it applies to the broader mass, right? So that's why stand-up comedians are really good, is because when they tell a joke, it's something that everyone has already experienced before, um and it's very relatable, versus like if you were to just do a one-way blast and there's no context in the sense of like relatableness to it. Like Tim Ferriss is a good example. Like his information is really good, but it's so boring that it's hard to stay tuned to like I have to like consume this information in bits and pieces because it's otherwise it's quite boring. So um so that's where the play kicks in my opinion, is just to energize and to relate. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, that's a helpful answer. Thank you.
um all right, so we can wrap up the interview here, Mitchell. So um thanks for coming out and sharing more about your life as a number three. Definitely got some good data from you, so I appreciate it.
I believe it. Yeah. Thanks for the conversation. It was definitely fun to talk. I haven't had a chance to talk in depth about these kind of topics in a while, so it got my brain working.
Yeah.
In some ways, it gave me some things to think about.
All right. Awesome, dude. All the best to you and your girlfriend, and take care.
Thanks. You as well.